Okay, we are in three, two, one. Rock and roll. Hey there, everyone. Coach Mark here. We're just going to do kind of an extemporaneous live. I am just going to be rambling a bit about the Florida's Strongest Man prep program that I wrote for the show. So this was a 12-week program I wrote in advance as part of being a coach with Strongman Institute. 12 weeks, 4 days a week. Helps you unleash your inner Florida man. Worked out great for this gentleman here, Chris Steffs, who actually won his field in the 105 kilo class. And he trains out of Deb's gym there in Florida. And what do you know? He has me listed as his coach, so that counts for something. A really quick shout out to Deb's gym as well. They are a 24-hour facility there. From what I'm understanding from the members, really neat old school kind of place. They've got strongman implements, they got turf, they got old school weight rooms, kind of like an Arnold adjacent type place. So it seems like a really great gym. So if you are in Lakeland, Florida, make sure to give them a look. This is not a paid partnership. They just seem like a really cool facility. And I think it's always good to shout out good gyms. There's their number right there. So yeah, give them a reach out if you're in the area. Seems like a really neat operation. But anyways, let's talk a bit about the program itself. So as a 12-week program done 4 days a week, it was made for the show, obviously. And the show, actually, is what we should talk about first, is the show. The show consisted of the following events. The first was an overhead press series where you do a wagon wheel axle clean and press into a sandbag clean and press, and then max reps on the log. And obviously you'd have to do the first two implements and then rep away on the log thereafter. And it was press away on the log. You did not have to clean every single rep. Then it was a carry medley, 50 feet down with a yoke, and then 50 feet back with a sandbag carry. Pretty basic operation there. And then the idea is the sandbag needed to be on a specific platform, right? You couldn't just throw it. Then it was a 13-inch axle bar deadlift, last man standing style. Now this one did have premeditated jumps in terms of the loading, which did factor into the programming itself. Then after that was a Saxon bar deadlift for max repetitions. And then last but not least, an Atlas stone to shoulder for max reps. So now that we know the events, let's talk about how we trained for it. So with this, the split was a main pressing day, a deadlift focus day, a secondary pressing plus stone to shoulder day, and then squat plus carry. And in the program, it was written as if you had both implement access as well as a commercial gym alteration, depending on what you had access to. With it, the program was percentage based, and it was based off of either implement load or it was based off of your target max for the deadlift because it did have mandatory jumps. In general, accessories were done RPE 7 to 8. And then with the Saxon deadlift in particular, we used a lot of singles in RPE there just because it was such an oddball event. So that being said, let me just skip here. All right. The program itself. So I'm going to be scrolling a lot because when I wrote the program, what I did is I did day 1, and then I do block 1, block 2, block 3, then day 2, block 1, block 2, block 3. Whereas, if you're running it, obviously you're going to do all of block 1 days 1, 2, 3, and 4, then all of block 2. So if I'm scrolling a lot, just pardon me there. It's kind of one of those things where when I'm writing it, it saves me a lot of time to organize it in that fashion. And hey, it's a free program, so there you go. So day 1, that's our main pressing day. It starts with the axle clean and press, and then the log press away. So when I say clean and press, the idea there is you would clean every rep generally, but you didn't necessarily have to because really at day's end it was a single rep. But you just want to make sure you were efficient. So you can see it's a pretty basic progression there, 60%, 65%, just adding sets, for example, between weeks 2 and 3. And then the log press away, we started pretty light as well. When it comes to show peaking in general, the programs I tend to write are more block, whereas in the off season, that's when I run more of a true conjugate style. Though really, if you read the literature, it gets more interesting because block periodization is actually the original form of conjugate training when you look at how Zadasorsky came up with it. Whereas West Side Barbell, as most of us know it for conjugate training, is technically a complex parallel system. But that is a whole another long rambling video, or you can check out my 10-part video series, The Conjugate Codex, where I talk about this a bit more. But then after your first 2 pressing events, you'd move into a sandbag press. And for the first block, I just wanted you getting 10 to 15 minutes in, practicing it, feeling out this one. And if you didn't have access to the sandbag, the alternative was a seated dumbbell overhead press with no back support. And the reason why I specifically wanted this done with no back support in the first block was first to limit load, but also by not having back support, you really had to learn to create cervical and thoracic spine extension rather than just leaning back more. And there's a big difference between just laying back more and actually getting more extension in your upper and mid back. Because if you just lean back more, you're actually going to limit the amount of leg drive you can put into your overheads. Then after that, we just had some basic accessories, some face pulls, some glute raises, and tricep press downs. Nothing too fancy there. Now, day 2 was our deadlift day. And remember, this was based off of your target max for the competition, where you'd either do the 13-inch axle deadlift or just a standard barbell deadlift from the floor. And the reason why we opted for the barbell deadlift from the floor here is I figured with the bend at a heavy enough deadlift, it'll get you in a position that approximate where the axle deadlift at 13 inches would be. And again, very basic linear progression we're running here, or block progression that we're running for the axle deadlift. And then the Saxon deadlifts, we just do 3 weeks on, just a couple sets of 6, playing with it, feeling it out. If you didn't have access to the implement, it's just a fat grips deadlift or a Saxon grips deadlift if you had access to it. Then after that was a sandbag complex where it'd be something like a couple picks. So you pick it, drop it, pick it, then you'd get it in your lap and then do 3 extensions, and then you just adjust accordingly. Whereas if you did not have access to the sandbag, I'd want you doing something like barbell high pulls or Zercher extensions, just something like 8 triples or 5 sets of 5, just getting that explosive work in. Then you would do a barbell row, any variation that you like. Knowing what I know now, I'd probably swap that out for a fat grips neutral bar row. That's that FNG row that you hear me talking about all of the time. Then it would be a behind the back barbell shrug, no straps. And this was to build your grip, because this show with the Saxon bar deadlift, it was going to be a grip test. Plus the sandbag carry, again, strong grip, strong man, right? And if you didn't want to do that, you could do it with a trap bar. Same idea though, we're just doing time under tension sets here. Then there's some slow eccentric hammer curls, just really good for the elbow health and kind of good for the forearm strength. Then we'll move into day 3. So this was the axle log bag medley. And the entire idea here is for the first wave, you just wanted to hang at around 60 to 70% of competition loads, spending 20 minutes, and you just do 3s on each implement, cycling through the implements, just getting practice, working on your transitions. And if you didn't have access to the implements outright, you would alternate between a barbell and heavy dumbbell presses. Just think an RPE 8 with a dumbbell, so what you could do for 5, right? So you do 3 barbell push presses and then move into the dumbbell presses. Then after that, a strict log press or a strict barbell overhead press. Pretty basic operation there. Then we do some ramping sets with the axle floor press or barbell floor press. Really love the floor press when it comes time to peak your overhead press, just because it's a little easier on the shoulders, but you can really get a lot of overload in your triceps. Then it was a sandbag to shoulder. Again, first wave, you're just getting 10 to 15 minutes of practice, just kind of dinking around with the event. Otherwise, I'd have you doing Zercher good mornings just as a bit of a density set. And again, if I were to kind of do a retrospective, I probably would have added in some landmine twists here, but I still think what we have is good. Then some dumbbell windmills. These are just one of those movements that I think everyone should be doing. Mobility, stability, and it's one of those ones where it helps you reclaim an implement if it gets out of control, especially the yoke. I think the dumbbell windmill is an incredibly underrated variation for improving that. Then some behind the neck lat pull downs or a front pull down if your shoulders didn't like going behind the neck. And last but not least would be day 4. Paused front squats. Paused front squats are always a good option for the strongman athlete. Otherwise, you could do a paused Zercher squat. And then you had your choice of where you'd either train the yoke bag medley at a given percentage of competition load, or you would do 2 other exercises, which included a barbell march in place for a given amount of steps based off of a certain percentage of competition load, and that is steps each side, as well as Zercher lunges, and ideally Zercher walking lunges if the space allowed it. Then we'd do some ab wheels and landmine rotations thereafter. So you can see in block 1, everything's pretty light, and that's just to help you get used to all the implements and get used to training across it. Then we're going to move on, and now we're talking about block 2. And you'll see here with the axle clean and press, we're going to start with 15 singles every minute on the minute. at 70%. And then the following weeks are a little less intensive, and that's because we're pushing the log quite a bit more. So what you'll see is, for example, it's 4 sets of 4 to 6 in week 5 or week 1 of the new block. And then you can see the percentages jump a fair bit there because this event was done as a press away fashion. I wanted to make sure that we trained the repetitions. And then, much like we did in the first block, there was sandbag press away or a dumbbell overhead variation, in which case this block, we swapped out the sandbag press away, or the seated, no support dumbbell overhead press for a standing one. Again, just helping build that arch, and because we built some tolerance to the position in the first block, now we're not going to immediately overload the low back by adding it in block 2. Otherwise, you could do the sandbag press away, and it was, again, heavily RPE based with a lot of implements that don't rely on plates for loading. I think RPE is a winning move just because you have to rely on that. But then if you did the standard dumbbell overhead press or Swiss bar, if you had access to it, you'd see there we'd just be hitting some higher rep top sets just to build the strength and stability to hold those awkward pressing positions come showtime. And then basic accessories as always. Day 2, block 2, just simple progressions in terms of what we're doing with the primary deadlift. And then the Saxon deadlift was just 3 sets of 5 rather than 2 sets of 6, just slowly increasing the intensity week to week and dropping it in week 8. With our sandbag, we'd be doing EMOMs to start, and then we'd do an alternating 2s and 3s in week 6. Then, again, we're just adding weight, getting used to the implement, going heavier. I like sandbag extensions a lot, because if you think about the sandbag extension for this event, it would help you train not only for the yoke to sandbag series where you have to extend and put the bag onto a platform, but as well it does have transference to your sandbag to shoulder. Then some barbell rows, and again, I probably would have swapped that out for the FNG row, knowing what I know now, just because coaches evolve, we learn. At least, hopefully we do, otherwise there's a problem. We continued on with our no strap shrug variations, but now we're doing top sets again, just building the grip, and then some Zottman curls. I like Zottman curls a lot. Really nice for helping keep the forearms from getting too beat up, and just adds a good bit of variety. And then day 2, we are now training the medley itself, and the idea here, as you can see, there was actually reps. So it'd be 1 on the axle, 2 on the bag, 3 on the log, for example, and then it would change throughout the weeks. But you'll see we always kept the log higher rep because it was a press away event. Whereas the bag, I did want to try and get a couple extra reps with it in the first week just to help people get used to that thing. Otherwise, you would adjust this out for the barbell and heavy dumbbell pairing. Some strict log press. The axle floor press remained just ramping sets. And again, nothing too fancy here. Then it would be the sandbag to shoulder, and you can see the idea here is we were hitting heavier singles, getting you to touch competition weight by the end of the block, and then doing higher rep back offsets thereafter, or doing snatch grip high pulls if you didn't have access to the implement. Snatch grip high pulls are an awesome strongman developmental movement. Windmills and BTN lat pull downs remain because, again, good exercises. And then in day 4, block 2, you would swap out the paused front squat for a giant camber bar box squat just to give you a bit of a different stimulus. I also think the camber bar box squat is a really good one that leads into yoke runs. I think there's a lot of intercompatibility with them. And then the yoke bag medley, you can see there, again, we're just doing runs at a given percentage of competition loading, skipping them in week 8. Otherwise, you would do the march in place as well as the Zercher lunge combination, and then some core work. And then last, but certainly not least, let's talk about block 3. So this was our peaking phase of the show. So, first off, pressing day. Axle clean and press, 12 singles at 75 to 80%. Then you were just doing singles, a little bit heavier, dropping the overall volume, of course, and increasing rest. Nothing too fancy. And then for the log press away in week 9, I had you doing 2 rest pause sets. So that would be you just roll it up, 90% of the target competition, rep out, drop it, rest 20 seconds, rep it out again. You'd only do 2 efforts in the rest pause. That would be 1 set, and then you'd repeat that. So before total sets, because it's 2 sets of 2 closely packed rest pause sets, right? Then in week 10, set of 5 to 6 or so at competition weight, and then a back off set, or a couple back off sets of 1 to 3, and then just a couple triples at or around competition weight. And then, because week 12 would be obviously your competition deload week. And then your sandbag press away, heavy 3 in week 9, heavy 5 in week 10, and then some singles in week 11 at whatever you hit in week 10. Otherwise, you'd be doing standing dumbbell or Swiss bar overhead press. Nothing fancy. Then as we move to our deadlift here, I'd have you hitting, again, singles. So you can see it's a very standard progression for the deadlift in that the first wave, you're doing a heavy triple, some back off fours. Then you're doing a heavy double, back off triples. Now you're doing a heavy single and back off twos. Nothing fancy at all. And we do not have you hitting your competition target. The reason why is, again, you had mandatory weight jumps, and the entire idea was to sort of treat this like a powerlifting type peak for this particular event, because that's essentially what it was. Then we would do sacks and deads where you'd just be doing ramping sets, with week 11 being that you are only doing 4 very light singles. Because if you think about it, a set of 3 at RPE 10, if you're doing 80% of that, it's going to be pretty darn light. Then just some basic extension work, or the Zercher extensions or high pulls, depending on what you had going on. Some rows, behind the back barbell hold still, and then reverse curls at the very end. So with the curl variations, you'll see what we did is throughout the blocks, we went to variations that force you to go lighter and lighter throughout, because by this point in the game, you're probably a bit tired, you're probably a bit beat up, and your main lifts are heavy. And then day 3, we were running comp medleys again, just really playing with it, seeing how we felt. And you'll notice in week 10, it's 3+. So if you were able to do more than 3 reps on the very last set, you would. And you had a pretty wide delta there. You could actually go above competition weight if you felt like you were able to. And then just RPE based for the various accessories. You know, again, knowing what I know now, kind of since I wrote this, right, because I wrote this 3 months ago, I probably would have modified the axle floor press to be more of a triphasic approach, where we would have done 4 weeks of slow eccentrics, 4 weeks of pause work, and then 4 weeks of standard work. But that's, hindsight is 20/20, as they say. Then we would just have the sandbag to shoulder, RPE 8 single, just playing with it, or snatch grip high pulls, and of course, windmills, lat pull downs. And then our final one is day 4, block 3, SSB box squat. We love a good SSB box squat. And the reason why it was done at this point in the wave, you're tired, you've had, 8 long weeks of prep, if not longer, depending on where you're at in block 4, right? Or block 3, rather. And the entire thesis was just to kind of warm up the legs and hips anyways. You'll notice we did make heavy use of box squats in this, because when you are peaking for a strongman competition, your squat is an accessory. It is not a star movement. It is there to make everything else shine brighter. So then you do your yoke and bag medley, and then or your march in place / Zercher lunges, and then core work. So overall, what you'll see is we did not go to actual comp load on a lot of these things aside from the presses. But if we actually look at, for example, sandbag to shoulder, we only had a few touches here and there at competition load. And the reason why is, for a lot of this, we want to build a good floor of your capability. And I find that people who tend to hyperfixate on 1 rep maximums in prep usually are the ones that tend to fall apart come competition time. But yeah, that's just a good overview of how we train for this show, whether it be for commercial gym or strongman gym. Worked out pretty well because, again, Chris took first place in his field. And again, one more shout out to Deb's Gym. Make sure to check them out. But yeah, hope you folks have a good one. That was just a nice, fun ramble discussing the program for Florida's Strongest Man, or it really should have been called the Strongest Florida Man. So you could, yeah. Anyways, that's all I got for you folks. Hope you have a good one. I'll see you next time.